Have you ever wondered what would happen if vampires really existed on Earth? Let's delve into the shadowy realm of the hypothetical, where the night is not only filled with ordinary earthly creatures, but also with ageless beings that walk among us, the vampires. Vampires, as we know them, originate from ancient folklore, where they were depicted as nocturnal creatures that sustain their immortality by drinking the blood of the living. Over the centuries, these legends have evolved and proliferated, weaving their way into the tapestry of our modern culture. Today, we see vampires in a different light thanks to popular books, movies, and TV shows that have reimagined them as charming, complex, and sometimes even heroic figures. Now, let's pose an intriguing question. What if these mythical beings were not just figments of our imagination, but actual entities living among us? How would our world change if humans coexisted with vampires? Imagine a world where the night holds more than just the moon and the stars, but creatures of the night, vampires. In a world where vampires roam the streets, coexistence is inevitable. Imagine a society where the night holds equal, if not more significance than the day. As day turns to night, we'd find ourselves sharing streets with creatures of the night. The first thing we'd notice would be the shift in our daily routines. Night shift jobs would suddenly become more prestigious, more sought after. The nightlife, once a niche, would expand and flourish, becoming a norm rather than an exception. But what about our laws? Would they change to accommodate our nocturnal counterparts? There would likely be new laws implemented to ensure the safety of both humans and vampires. Perhaps a curfew for humans or designated areas for vampires to feed without causing harm. And what of the vampires who break these laws? Would we see the rise of a new form of law enforcement, one that operates under the cover of darkness, specializing in supernatural crimes? Then there's the question of our social hierarchy. In a world shared with vampires, where would humans stand? Would we coexist as equals, or would one species reign over the other? Would vampires, with their enhanced strength and longevity, rise to positions of power? Or would humans, with their numbers and daylight advantage, maintain control? Would we see humans aspiring to become vampires, seeking the promise of eternal life and power? Or would the fear of the unknown keep us at bay? It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And what of love, friendships, and relationships? Would they cross the boundary of species? The idea of a human falling in love with a vampire is not unheard of in our tales and stories, but could this become a reality in a world where vampires are no longer mythical creatures, but our neighbors, colleagues, friends, or even lovers? Life as we know it would be turned upside down with the dawn of a new era, the era of the vampire. The coexistence of humans and vampires would undoubtedly bring about a seismic shift in our society, one that could either lead to a harmonious coexistence or a catastrophic conflict, only time would tell. But what about the vampires? How would their existence alter in a world shared with humans? Let's imagine the vampiric lifestyle. The most essential aspect, of course, would be their dietary needs. Vampires, as we know, depend on blood for sustenance, but in a world where they coexist with humans, hunting isn't a viable option. So what's the solution? Blood banks, of course, but not the kind we're used to. These institutions would operate on a larger scale, perhaps even with voluntary donors or synthetic blood substitutes developed specifically for our fanged friends. Next, let's consider their living conditions. Vampires are traditionally nocturnal, but in a modern, bustling world, would this remain the same? Maybe, maybe not. Vampires might adapt to a diurnal lifestyle using high SPF sunblock, or perhaps they'd stick to the night shift, taking advantage of the quieter hours. The housing market would also have to adapt. Homes outfitted with UV-protected windows, blackout blinds, and basement sleeping quarters would become a hot commodity. And let's not forget the classic coffins. They could become the next big trend in furniture design. Now, how would vampires interact with humans? Would there be a mutual understanding or constant tension? It's intriguing to ponder. Maybe vampires would become celebrities of sorts, their immortality and allure making them fascinating figures in popular culture. Or perhaps they'd remain elusive, maintaining an air of mystery and intrigue. The potential for vampire-centric businesses and industries is vast. Bespoke coffin makers, blood sommeliers, nighttime tour operators, the list goes on. There could even be vampire-focused media outlets and social platforms giving vampires a space to share experiences, advice, and connect with their human counterparts. Imagine the world of fashion where vampire chic becomes the latest trend, with capes and Victorian lace making a grand comeback. Or the food industry where night owl eateries cater to the nocturnal crowd with blood-infused delicacies. Vampires, once creatures of the night, would now be part of our everyday life. A chilling thought, isn't it? In this shared world, who holds the power, humans or vampires? A question that stirs the imagination, doesn't it? The balance of power in a realm where vampires and humans coexist would be a captivating game of chess, with moves and counter-moves shaping the world's future. Consider the possibilities. Humans, with their innovation and numbers, could hold a considerable sway. They could form alliances, create defenses, and perhaps even find ways to neutralize the vampire's supernatural abilities. On the other hand, vampires with their strength, speed, and immortality could easily overpower individual humans. They might form their own alliances, using their longevity to manipulate events over centuries, perhaps even subtly controlling human society from the shadows. Conflict would be inevitable as each side vies for dominance. Yet alliances could also form, born out of necessity or mutual respect. The struggle for dominance could create a world of intrigue and constant change. In a world shared with vampires, the balance of power would be a constantly shifting, precarious thing. The existence of vampires on Earth would undoubtedly change our world in ways we can hardly imagine. We've delved into the hypothetical cohabitation of mankind and these mythical beings, considering how society would need to adapt to accommodate the night-dwelling, immortal populace. We've examined the vampiric lifestyle, a nocturnal existence defined by immortality and a thirst for blood, and how it would impact our norms and practices. We also pondered the balance of power. With vampires' supernatural abilities and countless years of experience, they could potentially wield significant influence, subtly shaping the course of human history from the shadows. In this speculative world, our everyday life would be tinged with an element of the extraordinary, the mysterious, and perhaps the terrifying. While the existence of vampires remains a fascinating fantasy, it's certainly intriguing to ponder the possibilities of such a world. Until then, we can only imagine and of course enjoy our vampire stories from the safety of our living rooms.